Shalom and welcome to today's Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing what does the future hold for Egypt and the Middle East. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's guest is Tarek Heggy, who's an Egyptian reformer and author. And Tarek, it's been a while since you've been on the Middle East Report, so it's great to have you back on the programme.
I'm very happy to be with you after 5 years.
Excellent. And Tarek, can you share something about your background and your childhood growing up in Egypt?
Yes, I was born in Port Said, a Mediterranean city. In 1950, I was raised in Egypt. Most of my education was in Egypt. And I had, throughout my life, two careers, an academic and a corporate. The academic never stopped. And this is the background of me as a writer. And I wrote 18 books in Arabic, and I have 5 of them translated into English, and some of them also translated into French and Italian. The corporate, I worked for an oil company, probably the largest oil company in the world, Shell, and I was the head of its operations in the region for 10 years, from 86 to 96. Incredible.
And what was it that led you to take a very interesting path, and that is to really push for modernisation, democratic reforms, freedom of, for example, freedom of religion in your native country, and also warning us all about the threat of radical Islam?
I just mentioned that I spent like 20 years of my life in a British corporate. So I was every day asking myself why they are that progressive, why they are doing well. And the answer was very clear: because they are scientific, because they kept religion as religion. Religion is a personal choice. And because they segregated religion from state, because they allowed people to think freely, I came on my own to what I described later as the values of progress. Yeah. Pluralism, I was seeing this every day. Critical mind, acceptance of the other, and most importantly, the coexistence, which the Arab world has a major problem with. And they are all related values when you say about pluralism, acceptance of the other, otherness, critical mind, coexistence. I mean, they are all related. So I saw in my years in a British corporate that I saw the journey from the Middle Ages to the 20th and 21st century. And the label was scientific thinking. And that's what I'm preaching in my writings.
Excellent. And your native country, Egypt, has gone through an incredible transformation over the past 10 years, particularly since the Arab Spring, and we saw the fall of President Mubarak being replaced by the Muslim Brotherhood president, and then President Morsi, then followed by General Sisi. Can you share with us really what's happening in Egypt today? I know that's a big question, but where is Egypt today?
I think that Egypt was put on the wrong track since July 52, when a military coup d'etat overthrew King Farouk. We had a democracy that was incomplete, but it was a democracy. We had a society that was acceptable to Jews, to Christians, to many, many minorities. Alexandria was the city of minorities: Maltese, Greek, Maronites, Jewish. As of 1950, Egypt started to close the windows of freedom. And we had, I remember I was 6 years old when I heard a Jewish friend of my father in Port Said saying to him, "We are leaving, but it will happen with the Christians after a few decades." It didn't happen, but the Christians are suffering. So the man meant, if you don't have a place for us, you will not have a place for any different ones. So I believe that Egypt has been on the wrong track since '52. Mubarak is just a knot in this chain, and he stayed too long. Someone was limited capabilities, staying for 30 years, and not even this only, but wanted to his son to succeed him. So there was anger. And when Mubarak fell, the only ones who were ready to take over are the Muslim Brothers, because as Bourguiba, the president of Tunisia, once said, the situation in all the Arab countries that you have two powers, one above ground and one underground. The rulers and the Muslim Brothers. And this what was the situation in February 2011. They came to power, and they were assisted also by external bodies to come to power. And many people in the West thought they are legitimate, and I've been arguing against this, that no, you can't be a religious party and legitimate. And when somebody says, but there is a Christian party in Germany, I said, no, they don't use the Bible as a constitution, but as a source of values. It's a totally different story.
Absolutely, yes.
Nobody goes to the parliament and says, in book of Joshua, this is said, do it. No, there's nothing as such. But the values are based on the Bible. So the support to the Muslim Brothers, in my view, was wrong. What happened when the army overthrew the Muslim Brothers theoretically is wrong. Practically, there is no other solution. Egypt would have been another Pakistan, no, even Afghanistan with the Muslim Brothers, because we have the right to ask people where Islamists succeeded in building a modern country. And we have nearby the example in Gaza. This what would have been Egypt.
Yeah.
Gaza is a jungle. Yeah. People came to power by democracy and said bye-bye to democracy. We don't want you. You were the vehicle that we used to come to power. And I believe that Egypt was rescued from the Muslim Brothers. But since then, there are signs that Egypt will remain between two jaws, if I may say. Yeah. Either the military government or the Islamist. And I believe that if I have only this choice, I will go with the government, but try my best to change the rule of the game and make Egypt more of a civil country. But I will not have this chance with the Muslim Brothers. And the example is, again, Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think that President Abdul Sisi is doing? Primarily because he took over when the country was in complete chaos. 13 million Egyptians took to the street to protest against Mohammed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a clear rejection of the values of the Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam by the people of Egypt. And on the whole, the Egyptian people seem much happier with General Sisi as president than his predecessor. Is that the case?
Let me say that when I evaluate Sisi, I say four things. Number one, he did save Egypt from a very dark future. Egypt, as I said, would have been another Gaza, and even worse. Why? Because we have like 15 million Christians, and Gaza doesn't have this. If Gaza has 15 or 20% of its population Christians, the situation would have been worse. So number one, Sisi did save Egypt. There's no doubt about it. Number two, by the Middle East measures, he kept Egypt safe. You don't compare Egypt to Belgium or Sweden. Compare Egypt to Libya, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. No, Egypt is much safer. So this is number two. Number three, he's doing very well in what I call it the hardware of his mission. If I may use the term hardware and software. The hardware is roads, infrastructure, whatever, I think he's doing well. With regard to the software being education, the religious speeches, the religious education, very little is done. And he called for it, but he didn't deliver. So, because actually the hardware is much difficult than the software. Yeah, the hardware you need to borrow money and you employ companies to do it. But the software, you need to have brains. And Al-Azhar is, in my view, is problematic. Imagine if you think of Al-Azhar in the following way. They have 150,000 mosques. They deliver 52 speeches a year. So you multiply 150,000 by 50. Who else has a podium as such? If these people spread a positive message, Egypt will make a breakthrough. Imagine 150,000 Friday prayers during which the preacher says either good stuff or bad stuff. Either he condemns and curses the Jews and the Christians, or call for coexistence and living together in peace and respect others. So I believe that the biggest challenge of Sisi is what to do with such an institution, Al-Azhar, that takes a great deal of the budget of the government. And I also don't understand why Al-Azhar owns a university that doesn't accept Muslim students. They have 500,000 students in the Azhar University. And I say it's amazing. The Christians pay taxes. The government collects the taxes, spends on many things, including Al-Azhar, that does not allow Christians to come to. So I think the real problem of that Sisi faces is what I call it the software of the society. The brain, the thinking, the culture, the education, the attitudes towards the world and others. Women would be included in this. Yeah. So this is the four subjects or standpoints that I look at Sisi from which.
So let's have a look now at a news report which stated that President Sisi was sworn in as Egypt's president for a second term.
The Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been sworn in for a second term of office. In the event which took place before Parliament on Saturday, Sisi was keen to outline his commitment to the nation. I promise in front of God, I am promising you, he said, to work honestly for the country. Fighting for you. To keep our beloved Egypt at the forefront of nations. I will end by saying together with you, long live Egypt. Long live Egypt. Sisi won more than 97% of votes in the March election, but 5 opposition candidates were barred from running. Since Sisi first came to power in 2013, he's pursued a crackdown on all opposition groups, including human rights organisations and journalists. The newly sworn-in president left the Parliament building amid tight security. Streets nearby had been cleared to allow his motorcade to pass through safely.
And that was President Sisi's inauguration for a second time as the President of Egypt. Tarek, I have to ask you, as President, we've seen him confront and challenge the imams to reform. We've seen him reach out to Israel and also reach out to the Coptic Christians in Egypt as well. Surely that's going in the right direction, isn't it?
Yes, he is the first head of the state to say that the Islamic religious education needs reform. But one should also say that very little has been done in this respect. It's good to ask for it, but it's even better to create the system and the mechanisms that will take us to this. With Christians, I think he is one of the best since Sadat was in confrontation with the Christians, and he even arrested their Pope, which is very brutal. Yeah. So I think Sisi means well with regard to Egyptian Christians. He pays them visits and goes to the cathedral and volunteered to build the largest cathedral in the new capital. But this is also insufficient. I mean, the problems of the Christians of Egypt are much more than this. Of course, this is appreciated, but the more important thing is citizenship. They have the full right to feel that they are 100% citizens of Egypt, not 90, not 80, not 70. Incomplete citizenship is a shame. What does it mean in this regard, incomplete citizenship? That are they represented in all segments the same way Muslims are? The answer is no. Are they in the army in what reflects their percentage in the population? They are about between 15 and 17%. I'm sure they are not. They are not in the Ministry of Interior and the police. They are not the governors. They are not in the cabinet. So what a Copt requires is that when he mentions his name, and probably will know that he's a Christian from the name, like a Mikhail or whatever, yeah, that nothing negative happens because of this. He will have his chance, and the citizenship will be complete. So I think Sisi has a real, but we have to be fair. He did not create the situation. He inherited the situation. Does it mean that he is not to be blamed? No. He could be blamed for keeping the situation as is. Unless he does something, if not today, tomorrow, history will blame him for sitting on a major problem, which is, let us say it, the Christians of Egypt are the original Egyptians. Egypt was all Christian until 642 AD, and then Islam came. So at least they are full-scale Egyptians.
Absolutely. Yeah. But Tarek, how does President Sisi deal with the growing threat of political Islam within the country, knowing that after the collapse of Mubarak's presidency, we saw the Muslim Brotherhood take over. They were very well organized. They have a large number of the Egyptian population on their side. How does he tackle this issue? Clearly knowing the majority of people don't want it.
It's very important. Why? Because it is very much future related, the question and the answer, yeah? If we go back to the software and hardware terms, the Muslim Brothers had the hardware, which is the organization, and you refer to as competent, clever, very much so. They are highly organized. I think he dealt with that very efficiently. And nearly it is not there. But the software is the mentality, is the culture that will breed new generations of Muslim brothers. The anger, the wrong preaching at mosques. I think very little has been done in this. So the problem could reoccur. Theoretically, why not? It did happen before because of reasons. Until you go and tackle the reasons, and these reasons are all non-materialistic. They are all education-related, culture-related, preaching-related, mosque-related. So I believe that he handled the hardware very well. But if I am him, I don't feel very happy with this. I feel happy relatively, but I say, in order to make certain that these people might exist within 5–10% of the population, I have to do this and this and this. If I don't do this and this and this, they will not remain within 10%. They will always be very hardliners, but we want them to be, take the Israeli society. There are the Haredim who are difficult to please, but they are not running the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
And the comparison is very important. Yeah, and the Haredim actually, in many respects, they are very hardliners. The way they treat women, children, yeah, but still they do exist with others, and the state above all of them is the arbitrator, yeah? And Egypt is far away from this. The culture in that Egyptians breathe has a lot of input from the Muslim brothers, and this needs to be tackled.
Absolutely. So how can the Christian community, such as the ancient Coptic Christians, be protected, knowing that many Coptic Christians and other evangelical Christians feel safer under President Sisi, but on the whole are very concerned about the growing Islamist threat posed to their status in Egypt?
Simon, you are absolutely right. Safer with President Sisi because of the tanks and the soldiers outside the churches. Not because the atmosphere is 100% peaceful. So there is a big difference, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they are well looked after. There are bodyguards and guards and officers and sometimes tanks. But this is not what we want. We want the churches to exist safe without the guards. And this needs a lot of work. And I think the real battle that Sisi didn't start yet, directly or indirectly, is with Al-Azhar, the Islamic religious institution that much more effective than the Muslim Brothers because of the reason I mentioned before, the mosques. If you have 150,000 podiums, you are ahead of anybody else.
That's true. So let's have a look now at this latest video, which looks at the plight of the murdered Coptic Christians by ISIS in Libya and how a cathedral is being built in their name in Egypt.
This is Al-Owa, an agricultural village in Minia in rural Upper Egypt. Painters put the finishing touches to a new church in remembrance of the 21 Christian men beheaded by Islamic State on the Mediterranean shore of Libya in 2015. Video footage of those beheadings was seen all over the world after Islamic State posted it online. The church will be inaugurated tomorrow on the 15th of February, the 3rd anniversary of their deaths. As part of the ceremony, the bodies of the 21 men were due to be reburied in this big coffin here in the chapel, but the families are still waiting for their loved ones' remains to be returned to them. Ahead of the inauguration, World Watch monitors spoke to Malak, whose son was killed, but first with Fifi, the daughter of one of the victims. She now works in the church bookshop.
يعني بالنسبة للكنيسة فرحانة إني بابا اسمه اتذكر في السنكسار، بقى لهم كنيسة باسمهم، حاجة فخر وشرف كبير. بس ويعني برضه في كنيسة بابا يعني الواحد حاسس إنه أصلاً في بيته يعني.
في الحقيقة يعني لما استشهدوا إحنا ما عرفناش هل هم رموهم في البحر أو رموهم في أي مكان، فإحنا ما كناش في الحقيقة نعرف أي حاجة يعني.
The land on which the church stands was donated by the village. The funds to build it came largely from the Egyptian government, which donated the equivalent of more than $500,000. That's unique, as the building of new churches is normally highly restricted in majority Muslim Egypt.
ما كانش المكان ده يتبنى فيه كنايس. وبرضه نشكر الرئيس السيسي اللي هو حس بقوة إيمان الشهداء دول، وناس بتحب بلدهم وتحب وطنهم وتحب دينهم، فلذلك أصدر قرار ببناء الكنيسة دهية على اسم الشهداء، شهداء ليبيا.
When World Watch Monitor visited, the church was full of builders and noise, but after tomorrow, it may become a place of pilgrimage. Despite the sadness of the loss of the 20 members of their community, one Christian came from Ghana, the event has boosted the faith of the local Copts. Pride seems to be their dominant emotion.
أنا في الحقيقة لما اتعرض الفيديو وشفت الفيديو وشفت ابني وسطيهم، أنا شكرت ربنا وحمدته لأنه عرفته وصل فين. لما عند الاستشهاد نطق وقال يا رب يسوع، أنا زادني فخر، اتبسطت.
أولا في البداية كان الموضوع صعب علينا نشوف يعني بابا كده يعني، بس ربنا بيبعت تعزياته في الوقت المناسب، وطبعا الواحد حاسس ان هو فخور بحاجه زي كده، يعني فخور ان بابا بقى شهيد يعني.
شفناها عباره عن افلام بس، لكن الموضوع اتجدد وزاد الايمان في الكل، لان الناس دي الشهداء اللي هم عاشوا وسطينا.
لما الكنيسه حلوه زي كده اتبنت وبقت باسمهم، تقول لنا ايه احساسك؟
انا في شعر في حاجه احسن من كده، يعني حسيت ان الاطفال الصغيره لها حب في الاستشهاد من اجل اسم المسيح.
A very moving and very powerful interview there as we saw the plight of the Coptic Christians in Egypt. The Coptics seem like incredible people, that something so horrific and barbaric as ISIS murdering all those young men on the beaches of Libya, and then out of it they have their own church, and having that granted more freedom to actually have their church rebuilt in the name of those martyrs shows something about the character of the Copts, doesn't it, Tarek?
Yeah, the Egyptian Christians are mainly the Copts. Yeah. There are different sects, but the majority is the Copt Orthodox. They are amazing people. They are extremely polite, modest, and their faith is amazing. They are the only people I saw in my life that they don't want to take revenge even from those who mistreat them. And this is true Christianity, and without them being as such, Egypt would have exploded. Imagine if the minority has the manners of the Muslim brothers. Egypt would have exploded. But they are true Egyptians, they love the country, they love the Muslim population, and they don't try to use the external world against their country at all. And do you know, I tell you something, it might not sound important, but I find it very indicative. Many Muslims in Egypt, especially the semi-educated people, describe the Egyptian Christians as cowards. They say, you know, they are very cowards. And I said the following during a TV interview in Egypt. What happened in Libya is the answer. That these people are the opposite of cowardness. 21 people with the knife on their neck were asked to abandon their faith and they refused. Would you call them cowards? It's a different character. It's different manners, yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are not violent, but describing them as cowards is total mistake. It's complete. I mean, these people, not one of them decided to run out of his Christianity and faith. If any one of the 21 said anything indicating that he will abandon Christianity, he would have been left to live. Not one of the 21. You look at their faces in the videos, yeah? An amazing control, faith, acceptance, and not even fear. I didn't see fear. So when somebody says they are cowards, the problem is in his mind. He sees this type of faith as cowardness. But they prove to be the opposite of cowardness, just the opposite.
Absolutely. On to another subject, really, that last year marked the 40th anniversary of Anwar Sadat's, the Egyptian president at the time's visit to Jerusalem to make peace with Israel. And next year it will be the 40th anniversary of the Camp David Peace Accord signed between Egypt and Israel. What's the state of relations under President Sisi between Israel and Egypt, Tarek?
I think, because I don't have information, but I sense that there is a rapport between the two states and mainly the two armies. And my evidence is, according to Camp David agreement, Egypt should not have an army in certain areas, but Egypt does have an army, and Israel does not complain, so Israel is allowing this to happen. It means that they are agreeing on handling terrorism in Sinai. I'm 99% certain that there is an agreement on how to tackle terrorism in Sinai and also on the other side, the Israeli side. Yeah. The relationship between Hamas and the Muslim Brothers is extremely important. People have to read about it. People in the West believe that the Muslim Brothers is an entity and Hamas is another entity. This is totally incorrect. Hamas name goes back to 1986. Before that, our official name was the Muslim Brothers Gaza branch. So it is part not of the international Muslim Brotherhood, of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And I believe that there is a state-to-state rapport. But is there a warm peace between the two countries? No. Why? Because Mubarak sat on it as is. He inherited the Camp David agreement because you referred to 79, Sadat was murdered, 81. Mubarak ruled for 30 years from 81. I think what he did is he got the Camp David agreement, put it on a seat, sat on it, and did nothing to make it to move, to develop. And that's why Israelis call it a cold peace. So I am one of the Egyptians who believe that Egypt has done enough for the Palestinians. The Palestinians seem to many Egyptians not to be keen to sort out the problem. We have a tragic situation in our country. Our priority should be Egypt. Palestinians, God bless them, let them help themselves to come out of their problem. But we should not make it our first priority. It is not. Our first priority is Egypt, Egyptian economy, Egyptian education, Egyptian relations with the world. And I think many people think alike and say what I'm saying. There are others who make it more important than Egypt. There are the leftists, like everywhere, yeah, who say Egypt's main problem is the Palestinian question. It's amazing because Palestinians themselves, they don't agree. Who are the representatives of the Palestinians? Are in the Ramallah or in Gaza? Yeah. The ones in Gaza, actually, they want the end of the conflict the same way Iran and Hezbollah want it. And you understand, of course, what I mean. The end of the problem is to have Palestine from the sea to the river. Number one, it's not doable. Number two, I don't want it actually to happen. Not only not doable, yeah, I don't want it to happen. Is it better for Egypt to have another backward country on our border? I'm now talking from the Egyptian perspective, yeah? No, I think it's much better that we develop what Sadat established and make people accept reality. And do you know the Arabs in this respect, Simon, are very puzzling. They all say, for instance, we should have accepted the 47 November resolution, but you didn't. And there is a new reality after 47. And I wrote once in one of the articles, and I proved it in this article, that every 10 years, the Arabs and the Palestinians ask for something that was offered 10 years ago, which means sense of reality is not there. Absolutely. If somebody doesn't have sense of reality, he will live with his problem forever. Yeah? Yes. I mean, now they say, let us go back to the 4th of June, 67. Okay, on the 4th of June, 77, you didn't say that. You said, let us go back to before 15th of May, 1948. So for me, I really don't want Egypt to waste resources on this problem, yeah? And work what is good for Egypt. And what is good for Egypt is illustrated in Sinai today.
Absolutely. Tarek, what's so interesting is that recently a Saudi cleric declared that Israel is going nowhere, and it's time that Saudi Arabia and the government of Saudi Arabia recognise Israel's right to exist, but also to right to normalisations with Israel, and stating the fact that so many nations have come and gone in the Middle East, and yet Israel's the most stable nation in the region. And it's interesting to know, isn't it, that the two nations that have signed peace treaties with Israel are the most stable of all the Arab states, namely Egypt and Jordan. Can you tell us why you think that's the case from an Egyptian perspective?
Yeah. I studied Saudi Arabia for years, and I think that in the 80s I wrote an article saying King Abdulaziz, the founder of the third dynasty, so this is the third Saudi kingdom, yeah? The first goes back to the 18th century. This one started at the beginning of the 19th century, of the 20th century, 1902. I said, King Abdulaziz is an amazing phenomenon. He left 47 sons. So his sons will rule for a long while. We are now at the end of the chain of sons. We are, for the first time, having a crown prince from the grandchildren, not from the children of the founder. I wrote 25, 30 years ago that when we go to the grandchildren, there will be drastic change. And I think that the crown prince in Saudi Arabia, let me put it this way, before 2020, there will be an Israeli ambassador in Riyadh and the Saudi ambassador in wherever, Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, I don't know, yeah, but in Israel. Why? Because there is a sense of realization in Saudi Arabia that there are doable things and there are not, and there are the opposite. And also what unifies Saudi Arabia and Israel is their view of Iran. Very similar view. They perceive Iran as a danger, and it is a danger. It is the most theocratic model we have on earth today.
Absolutely. And Tarek, what we're explaining this new military alliance that we're seeing in the Middle East today, which is a combination of Israel backed up by the Sunni Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, the Gulf states, and also Saudi Arabia as well. And primarily this is in reaction to the Islamic Shiite crescent of Iran, together with the alliance of the Muslim Brotherhood, with Qatar and Turkey. What's at stake in the Middle East today with these three major strategic alliances that we're seeing taking place? And how essential is it that, for example, that Europe and the British government back Israel and the Sunni states against the Iranians, or Turkey and the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood in the region for the future of the region?
Yeah. One of the most devastating facts that happened in the Middle East is the return of Khomeini to Tehran in '79. It didn't only exploded the radical Shiite Islam, but the other side as well. The other side wanted to be equally influential. And I believe that the real problem in the Middle East is the model of Tehran, because it gave the Muslim brothers the right to say, if there is a Shiite theocracy, why don't I have a Sunni theocracy? I think the group that you refer to will succeed in putting an end to this dream. But we will be left with a big question mark, Syria, because Syria is very much allied to Iran. And if Syria wants to survive, they have to take a step out of this. The Arab world will never accept Syria with such an alliance. The future of Syria is related to answering this question. Are you going to remain in what they call it, the Shiite crescent, or you will have a civil state?
Absolutely. So let's have a look at some of the regional strategic developments taking place and this growing alliance between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Sunni states in the region.
Now, another shocking report has detailed the unseen depths of Israeli-Egyptian security cooperation. The New York Times claims that Israeli military forces have carried out more than 100 airstrikes in the Sinai Peninsula, coordinated with Egypt to help suppress the Islamic State insurgency in the region. Though Israel and Egypt have an open alliance and frequently collaborate on security, especially on the Gaza border, Egyptian President Sisi has kept these airstrikes classified because diplomacy with Israel remains very unpopular among the majority of Egyptians. The collaboration allegedly began as far back as 2014. The IDF's attacks were apparently effective enough that it completely changed the Islamic State's strategy in Sinai. Originally, terrorists were targeting higher-profile targets such as the Russian charter jet incident in October of 2014. But they later switched to softer targets, such as mosques and churches, after Israeli airstrikes sent them on the run. Neither Israel nor Egypt has confirmed or denied these reports. According to the Islamic State, Israel is reported to have sent 3 targeted airstrikes against them in the Sinai Peninsula yesterday. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied the allegations. In addition to ISIS fighters, Abdullah Kishta, an ex-senior member of Hamas, was also reportedly killed. Kishta is believed to be the connection between ISIS in the Sinai Peninsula and Hamas in Gaza by assisting in the smuggling of weapons and trained militants between the two terror groups. In what can be considered a positive light, the fight against Hamas and the Islamic State, both considered internationally recognized terror organizations, has brought Egypt and Israel closer together. Disregarding a 1979 peace treaty, Israel has allowed Egypt to move forces closer to the border, and Egypt has given permission multiple times to Israeli air forces to operate in their territory, all in efforts to quash the spread of militant Islamic terror. The Israeli ambassador to Cairo, Chaim Koren, said of the situation, quote, "This is one of the best times we've ever had. There's good cooperation between the armies, we have understandings about the Sinai Peninsula, and basically we see eye to eye on the development in the region," end quote.
And clearly what we're seeing in the Middle East today is incredible developments. Tarek, who would have thought that we're living in such a time when the region has probably never been more dangerous, yet at the same time we're seeing Israel's acceptance as a nation in the Middle East being more embraced by the Sunni Arab states, with the realization that actually they need Israel for their own protection and the future survival of their nations within a very dark and difficult region. Can you explain the underpinnings of this urgent need for security and security cooperation with Israel in the region?
I think many Arabic-speaking people now do realize that our prime enemies are domestic and they are not external. We might have external, we might theoretically, but ignorance, Muslim brothers, poor education. I mean, these are our real enemies. I think many Arabic-speaking people do realize this now. And also, let us face it, you said it yourself earlier, that the Saudis say, we have been praying against the Jews for 70 years. We have been cursing them for 70 years. What is the realistic, practical result of that? Israel today is a much advanced country than in 48. Israel of 4th of June 67, not to be compared to Israel today. So you have to be realistic and say, this is a fact of life. We will live with this fact of life, yeah? And personally, I have no problem if Lebanon is Christian and Israel is Jewish and the rest are Muslims. To the contrary, I love my country when it was more Mediterranean than today. So I think that Saudi Arabia plays a very important role. And Saudi Arabia was behind the Sunni radical Islam and he said it, the Crown Prince, it's not me who's saying this. He said, we have been preaching the wrong interpretation of Islam for 5 decades. So I think there is a change to come. And the ones who will pick up this change and work on it will enter the 21st centuries, and the ones who won't will go backward.
Do you, in light of that, do you think there is a growing hope in the region? Because I think many Arabs were very shocked at the brutality of ISIS and realizing that ISIS carrying out the attacks that they did, the almost the Nazi-style attacks in the name of Islam, caused and is causing a kind of a reflective revision of Islam as a religion in the region. Do you see the Arab people themselves now wanting modernity, wanting freedom, wanting democracy, but not wanting an Islamic totalitarian regime?
I think what you said is absolutely right. If there is always a good side of any tragedy, the good side of ISIS is that people realize that we don't want this. Yeah. So, it is very beneficial that people realize that this is a devilish. But is there a hope? I say in some areas. In Libya, I don't see a hope. In Yemen, I don't see a hope. In Syria, I hope that Syria comes out of this as a modern state. But you can't say there is a hope or no hope in the Middle East. You will have to break it down into pieces.
And you wrote a book called The Plague of Radicalism, and maybe Western leaders need to actually read your book to understand the problems that we face. It almost seems as if the Middle East is freeing itself in some aspect from radical extremism. And yet, in the West, here in Britain and Europe, we seem to be embracing it. Can you explain the paradox?
In a few words, the message of this book is there is no moderate Islamism and the opposite. Islamism is a tree. The body of the tree is Wahhabism and Muslim Brotherhood, and the branches are, name it, from Al-Qaeda to Al-Nusra to whatever, to Boko Haram. My message here is you can't enter the modern time without separation between religion and state. All Islamist groups do not accept this. Europeans have to realize that there is nothing called moderate Islamism. Moderate Muslims practice Islam at home. But once they take Islam with them to the street, they don't remain moderate. They become theocrat. And I believe that there is a big mistake in Europe. And I believe that it is left-driven. I have been studying this for many years. I came to the conclusion that the left is betraying Europe, saying, give me your vote, I give you some of what you want to the minorities. And the end of this will be very dangerous. Look at the situation in France on the day they won the football cup.
Yep.
Why? Why we had this destruction? Because the level of fury and anger is very high. So I was invited to speak at your parliament 5 times in the past 5 years. My message was the same. Don't be cheated by the Muslim Brothers. They used PR companies to persuade you that they abandoned violence. Maybe they did, but somebody else does it for them. And I think that this is the case. Why would the Muslim Brothers use violence if somebody like Boko Haram or ISIS would do it for them? And the theory is the same, and the target is twofold target. Application of Sharia in a caliphate empire. So the main message is, as you, since the days of Voltaire, segregated religion from the state, don't allow anybody to come and cheat you by saying, I'm moderate, while he does not segregate religion from state.
And down to the last minute and a half of the programme, Tarek, and it's been a fascinating programme, so thank you. Can you share with our viewers what role we can all play in supporting the forces of freedom and democracy in the Middle East, but also to counter the threat of the growing radicalisation that's to do with Islamic extremism that we're seeing in Britain and Europe today?
I think we all have to call for support on 2 levels, economic and educational. Poor people are much easier to hunt by radical people, yeah? Because they have nothing to lose and they are desperate. So I think that the West in general, Europe in particular, qualified to work on the two levels. Make certain that poverty is the best thing for the ISIS type of organizations. I mean, when they offer somebody $150 a day to come to be a fighter, he will not think for 2 minutes, yeah? So you have to guide these countries to break through the vicious circle of poverty, but meanwhile work on education with them. And I know that there was Sheikh Al-Azhar here a few days ago, and he went to Canterbury, and the reason was number of scholarships by Oxford and Cambridge universities to students from Al-Azhar. We need all to work on the two horizons.
Tarek, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report, and we thank you so much that you are a leading light, not only in Egypt but throughout the region of the Middle East, promoting, urgent reform and standing for liberty. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and your dedication to this cause.
Thank you very much for a very stimulating conversation.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you for watching today's Middle East Report. We had a real insight into what's happening in Egypt today and also the region, and how it's important that we need to support reformers like Tarek, who have dedicated their lives for the cause of freedom in the Middle East. And let's hope and pray that that future comes about. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
دي فركة كعب وهتعملها قصاد الدنيا هتقولها وخد بقى عهد تعدلها سكت كتير خدت ايه مصر بسكوتك ما تستخسرش فيها صوتك بتكتب بكرة بشروطك دي بشرة خير قوم نادي عصا